Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast. Matthew and I are holding down the fort for this one today.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Jake pulled a fast one yesterday and did it without us, so.
Yeah. He had Radigan from Manus on. Oh, yeah. Here comes another yawn, dude. Matthew and I were just joking a moment ago about me yawning because I am tired. I am, let's see. I had to bring the family home from Idaho yesterday and cross 600 miles of desolate nothingness, also known as the state of Wyoming.
Don't tell Jacob that.
I always have to get my digs in at him, but hey, I'm glad to be back home, and we had a great time up in the Great White North, which was quite literally that. It snowed dang near every day we were there.
Wow.
And kids enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. We dragged them around on sleds for a lot of the days.
That's cool.
Like a four-wheeler. Actually, it's like a four-wheel drive golf cart. But anyway.
Yeah, my neighbors were doing that. It looked pretty fun.
Yeah. And that's what it's all about, right? It's like I know because of things I have memories of as a kid that stood out to me. Like I know that some of those experiences for my kids will be, memorable for their whole lives. So happy times, which is important to have considering the state of our nation.
Yes, we need some perspective.
Who we all have. Keith from Northern Indiana. Thanks for tuning in, Keith, on YouTube today. Hey, Scott and Tim and Rodney from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Casey, thank you for checking in. And let's see. And Chad and Bobby. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Today is a Justified Saves episode, so I think we ought to get right in. What do you say, Matthew?
Yeah, I love this episode.
Okay. All right. Today's got some good stories for sure. Well, let's hit the record button, if you will, on the audio portion of the show, and let's do that in 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode number 470. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman, and joined today by co-host, producer, man of many, many awesome things, Matthew Maruster.
I'm just happy to be here with you, man. And, of course, everybody who's logged in on Facebook and the YouTubes.
Good to be with you, brother. After a couple of interesting weeks as far as we had the holiday season upon us, Christmas, New Year's. I took a trip to Idaho. You've had some things going on as well, and here we are. So Matthew did an episode in our stead, or not Matthew, Jacob did the episode yesterday for both of us, which if you missed that episode 469, he shared some cool stuff, things he's learned and has achieved using the Manus. I guess he's probably using the X10 these days, but anyway, super cool stuff from episode 469. And here we are in episode 470. Hard to believe we are fast approaching that 500 mark. This episode is sponsored and brought to you by the new Ready Up Gear Range Ruck Backpack. This, we got our first shipment in of these, and they are flying off the shelves fast. El Quico. So, guys, you want to make sure you head on over to concealedcarry.com/range ruck to get one of these before they are all gone. I mean, we will be ordering more in, but just know that they are going fast. So you're going to want to make sure you take advantage of this deal now. These are an awesome 4 handgun backpack range bag that I carried with me at USPSA Nationals this year, and it worked awesome in that capacity. and it is now my range backpack of choice, my range bag of choice. In fact, it'll be going with me this evening to a USPSA match as well. So yeah, Range Ruck from Ready Up Gear. Guys, get one now. concealedcarry.com/Range Ruck. We have no guarantees or promises as to how long they will be in stock. Also, today's episode is sponsored by our very own concealedcarry.com Legal Boundaries by State book. It's particularly relevant, I think, when we are doing episodes like this one today with the justified save stories, defensive gun uses, because it's really important you understand your laws, also understand your carry laws for all the states that you might find yourself in. In fact, just yesterday, I went through three states. So it's good to know what I can and cannot do as I am on the road traveling, or even if you just need a good refresher on the laws of your own state where you find yourself. Guys, go to concealedcarry.com/gun law book to get your very own copy of the Legal Boundaries by State book. So today's episode, is hinted at, is the Justified Saves episode we do once a month, where we highlight and cover stories from the past month of justified use of deadly force in civilian contexts, meaning these are either non-LEO, non-military, or they're in some cases off duty, as long as they are not in their official capacity as a law enforcement officer or member of the military. Then they classify as potential stories that we share as part of this episode. And we do make effort to research, or at least have a reasonable reason to believe that the uses of this deadly force in these stories is justified, meaning lawful, because that's important. It's important, I think, for us to understand what permissible and what is not permissible under the law. Quite often we share stories where people cross the law, cross the line between lawful and unlawful use of deadly force, because those are valuable lessons to be learned as well. And the key is, I think, Matthew, is knowing in advance, before you ever find yourself in a situation like that, what the situations might be like, what the circumstances might turn out to be in advance. So I want to make the decision ahead of time. We can't decide ahead of time necessarily exactly how we're going to respond to circumstances that we are not able to foresee, but I think it's important to have a good idea that, hey, if I see somebody breaking into my car out front and I go out there to stop them and they're unarmed, but yet I shoot them to prevent them from stealing my car, then we have a problem, right? So that's the aim, that's the goal, is to help everybody be a little bit better prepared for those situations when and if they find themselves in such situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we really get into our first story, I do want to comment, Matthew. And Matthew, you and I talked offline about, possibly talking about yesterday's events in our nation's capital as part of an episode. And I don't know that we will do a full-fledged episode about that because it's not, it's not a particularly, it's not a gun specific thing or issue, or, yes, it may have some implications with regard to the Second Amendment, and yes, maybe some Second Amendment fueled emotions that have led our country to where it is, to where you have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people assembling in our nation's capital to express their support or non-support for certain issues. But all I can say is that yesterday was an ugly, ugly day in our nation's capital. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and I'll probably get a little bit of flack for this, but I try to remain consistent, and I always put, the shoe on the other foot test. And I don't think that necessarily the violence smashing windows and in those types of things is necessarily the greatest path to changing things. I understand, the sentiment, and I'm certainly not judging anybody, but I think that to be, and we should. I think there is a distinction between random violence, jacking people in their cars as they drive down the street or burning buildings and stuff is a little bit different than the violence that we saw yesterday. However, that's not, to say I condone violence or anything. I think we can differentiate between random violence and violence that's occurring because, they're trying to force their way in. But I don't think violence is necessarily the best path. But I fully think that the people that were down there that made their voices heard in a loud way, but not a violent way. I think that's kind of like what we should promote. I think, but and maybe history is going to show maybe that. A little bit different. It's still kind of new, right? So we don't have all the information, but I think being consistent about not being violent to affect an end is probably the best path. But hey, I don't know. I'm not. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I share a similar sentiment to yours. That first of all, it's a complex situation, and there was a lot that was going on. But the first thing I'll just state about yesterday's riots, protests, whatever, I don't want to call it. I mean, some of it was definitely riot-like behavior. When we're talking about damaging property and breaking into the U.S. Capitol building, that would be, I think, definition of a riot. Protesting for sure is taking place, but the fact of the matter is, thousands upon thousands of people were peaceably assembled and were making a statement in an impressive manner. And by and large, 99.9% of that was peaceful and was appropriate and was powerful, actually, I think, in just how I frankly, when I first started seeing some images of how many people were actually assembled, I was like, wow, dang, yeah. That's impressive. And so good for you. Some of you maybe within the sound of my voice, maybe we're even there. And, good for you for doing that and being there and being a part of that in a peaceful manner. Secondly, it seems quite apparent to me, and there's more and more evidence coming out supporting this, that there were those amongst the people that started pushing their way toward the Capitol that were there for nefarious purposes, that were not necessarily a part of the larger group in terms of being there in a peaceful manner to make a display of all these other peaceful people assembling in support of our president and all of our nation. But there were clearly those there that were there to start and to instigate trouble. And it's hard to say exactly who's all involved and where that started and who did what, but there was definitely those amongst some of the worst instigators that I would not say were part of, that they are not affiliated with. Like, first of all, I would say I'm so glad and happy to see people that assembled there in our nation's capital peacefully. I would say I associate myself with them. That's awesome. Kudos to you. I do not consider these actors that were committing violence to be part of that association. And that is unfortunate. And it's also unfortunate that became the focus. The violence became the focus and detracted from the good of the greater group that was there. So that is unfortunate. And I think that's about all I got to say about that. Yeah. It's time to move on to our justified save stories. So
yeah, these are crazy.
Yeah. In fact, Matthew, why don't you share with us the first one here? We have a story out of WKBN.com. This is in Pennsylvania, specifically Erie, Pennsylvania, where police say a man firing at a second man at a Pennsylvania gun range was killed by a third man. Now that, by its, at face value, might be a little bit of a confusing headline, but man firing at second man at a Pennsylvania gun range, killed by a third man.
Yeah, so this happened. Yeah, this happened at 2 p.m. at the state Gamelands gun range. A 26-year-old was shooting, and apparently he turns and starts firing at another 28-year-old who is at the range, also shooting. We're not told if these people knew each other, if there was some sort of altercation or whatnot, but he apparently starts shooting another guy at the range. A 67-year-old guy who happens to be at the range sees what's going on, and then shot the initial guy who turned and started shooting the other guy. So the only one of them dies. I believe it was the initial guy who turned around and started shooting. And the other guy who was being shot at initially is treated for injuries, and he's at the hospital. It's interesting that this actually says that, let me get the correct, they actually arrested the older man, the guy who intervened towards the end. And so it's crazy. And what makes this even crazier, and obviously, there's a lot to unpack with the whole thing, but I remember, and you might have seen this post maybe a year ago, where somebody was talking about if somebody pointed a gun or somebody was flagging people down range or something like that, flagging the line at a public range. And he said, if I saw that, I would point my gun at him, and if he wouldn't stop, I'd shoot him. And I thought, like, man, that's crazy. There's always one person that thinks some crazy thing, but I don't think this is the same guy. But I don't know. I can only imagine that must be something that happened. Like, hey, don't you flag me, or something like that. And then he says, well, I feel threatened because you're flagging me, and starts shooting at this guy. It's just it's bizarre.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, kudos to the 67-year-old man for being so switched on to be able to save the life of somebody else. The one thing that we don't get from a story like this, I mean, this is literally a 6-sentence news story, maybe 5. It's like 5 sentences long. So that's unfortunate because it doesn't give us a lot of detail. And we also, it's unclear as to maybe what some of the intents were. And for that matter, we may not even be able to know or understand what the intent of this man that was initially, according to the story, he was firing down range, and then at some point turns and starts firing at somebody next to him. So in other words, we don't know if that was intentional or not. Could have been accidental. Like, that's fair, right? Like, it could have been that he was shooting and turned and didn't pay attention to where his muzzle was pointing and the fact his finger was still on the trigger, and then fired. And what we do know is he must have fired multiple times, because the man he shot is in the hospital being treated for multiple gunshot wounds. So seems somewhat unlikely that an accidental shooting would result in so many gunshot wounds to another person. Right. So, and the other thing is that we're not there, so we couldn't see, like, body language would be huge in this, where a person's eyes are looking, what's the expression on their face, and their overall body. Like I said, their body language would be really key as far as there's a very different look to someone who is intentionally turning and aiming a gun at somebody, and while intently looking at that person through their sights, their gun up on target, pressing the trigger. That's very different than someone who just happens to turn the gun sideways while their mind or their eyes or their attention is elsewhere and accidentally, fire off a couple of rounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important to, that kind of information would be important as to determining exactly what the intents were and whether these actions by this 67-year-old man who stepped in, and he stepped in by shooting at the first man. But it seems apparent based on how this is reading that the first man shooting the second man was intentional in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And this third man was switched on enough to instantly shoot his own gun. And he did in fact kill that first man. But may very well have saved the life of the second man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I misstated or misspoke. The guy wasn't arrested. The older gentleman. I was thinking about a different story that's coming later. So he wasn't arrested. So to your point, this guy stepped in and intervened, and when we intervene on somebody else's behalf that we don't know, there's a lot at stake when you do that. But apparently this guy determined, like, this was unequivocal that this guy was actively shooting this guy in an attempt to kill him. And the other guy wasn't shooting back, so, but yeah, to your point, that it was good that this guy actually, I don't know. It's tough to say, what, if you're being honest, you really have to take in a lot of information and make a split second decision. Am I going to get involved in this? Like, I don't know these two people, but like I said, he must have, through what he was seeing, one was the aggressor, or the more aggressive one. So
yeah, pause right there while I reset some things here on my computer. I'm experiencing some lag, so I apologize, folks, during the live show here, but let me just do some resetting and see if I can't get things working a little bit better for me here. Hang on. Okay. Does my audio sound okay?
Yep, you sound fine. You're back.
Did it ever sound funny before?
I didn't hear anything. Maybe somebody who's watching could tell you.
I was unsure if it was an audio issue as well as a video one, but definitely my video was lagging big time. So anyway, again, I apologize, folks, for that brief interruption there. All right, let's get back to it. Yeah, so an unfortunate incident here out of Erie, Pennsylvania, but again, as it seems to appear, I'm glad it seems to have resolved in a manner that saved somebody's life, at least from what we can tell. So interesting story for sure. And going back to you're talking about, Matthew, that situation where somebody was talking about, instantly turning and shooting somebody if they were to muzzle somebody else or that kind of thing. Again, I would exercise caution, like making the assumption, first of all, that somebody by accidentally muzzling someone else constitutes a deadly. Yes, it is a potentially dangerous thing when somebody maybe points their gun at someone else unintentionally, but as to whether that would warrant or justify deadly force, that's a tricky situation for sure. And I think articulating that in front of a judge, in front of a court, would be potentially tricky. And here's the other thing too. We can't guarantee by the fact that we intervene with force by shooting someone, that it doesn't cause them to inadvertently hit the trigger on their gun and still injure or kill that person they are muzzling.
Sure.
So that's the other thing, is it's far from a sure thing, and let's advise caution. The important thing is really trying to understand what someone's intent is, and that body language and facial expressions and words that are even said, potentially, that kind of thing. That all is all situationally dependent. That's for sure. Let's go now to Dayton247now.com. So this one obviously out of the Dayton, Ohio area. And it says here that a Dayton man shoots woman carrying golf club, and the woman is the one that gets charged. So, and again, kind of an interesting story here. I told you we had some doozies for you lined up for today's show, but basically this is the way it goes down. In the morning on this was actually Tuesday morning, just 2 days ago, about 8:15 a.m., a man confronted a woman who was outside damaging his vehicle with a golf club. The man reportedly told officers that she threatened to shoot him, so he returned to his apartment out of concerns that she had a weapon. And that suspect, this woman, was a 30-year-old woman that then followed the man into the building, still carrying this golf club, and she began striking the door with the club. The man told police that he then thought he heard a gunshot, at which time police said that the man shot through the door, striking her. So it sounds like he goes out to, hey, you are damaging my car with this golf club, please stop. And I imagine he's probably already on the phone or about to get on the phone with police to try to put a stop to this act of vandalism and damage of property. She then follows him back into what appeared, back to an apartment building. But it appears this man gets his door closed behind him because he shot through the door, as the story said, and struck her. So she's outside his door, banging on the door with a golf club. He claims he thought he heard a gunshot, which I suppose might be perceived by a person with someone striking their door with, very loudly, very hardly, if you will, with a golf club. Now, regardless of whether there was a gunshot or not, regardless of if there was an actual deadly threat towards this man or not, here's what I will say about this situation, is that shooting through an object where you cannot see through that same object is a risky move. You don't know exactly where this threat or this person is. You cannot guarantee your bullet will strike them, right? Because shooting through objects, while we can make some reasonable conclusions that a bullet will likely perform a certain way, we can't always guarantee that. So even if we think we have even if we know that, hey, if I shoot through this position place on the door, it's going to go through and strike this person who I consider to be a threat for whatever articulable reason, you cannot guarantee that round is going to strike that person the way you think it will, right? And so this is not the smartest move in the book. This is not the best play here, okay? And so again, I recognize that he may have thought that he heard a gunshot. It appears that there was in fact not a gunshot or a shot fired by this woman, based on the reporting anyway. But perhaps the smarter move is to take cover, get somewhere where you can protect yourself from potentially being struck by that. Because the problem here is, even if there is a threat, by you responding to that threat with your own deadly force, by firing your gun through this object, if it somehow missed that person and then struck somebody else, an innocent party, well, now we have that person's life hanging over you. You either seriously wounded, injured, or killed somebody else that was not even a party to this incident. And whether you are charged in that or not, whether you are sued or not in that, you still will have to live with that. And that's something I don't want you guys having to deal with.
Yeah, you hit all the key points. I would, there are a couple things that struck me. He initially did the right thing, right? He de-escalated or broke contact from the incident. I think, when we look at these stories, and oftentimes we cover these stories and we never get the follow-up. So in the story, it says there's an investigation, obviously, right? So we don't know if the guy will be charged at a later date or he never will be. And so these types of stories, sometimes when we don't see the result as the person being arrested and they never follow up and tell us if he's been arrested, people will look at these stories and be like, well, I heard about, all these stories about people shooting through doors and they never got arrested. Well, we don't know if this guy is ever going to be arrested or not. I'm not saying that he will. I'm just saying, we need to take these things, whether or not, like you said, whether or not he gets arrested or a civil lawsuit or whatever, it's important to learn, that you're exposing yourself to a lot of risk by shooting through a door like that. I think perhaps his initial response of retreating gave him a little bit more leeway in the eyes of law enforcement, as that he wasn't going out looking for a fight, right? So that might have showed a little bit of intent to not be involved in a shooting, but still, I don't we don't know what's going to happen, but it is definitely, we've talked about this a lot of times, like shooting through doors where you can't see what's on the other side, not great. So,
yep, that's right. That's right. Take cover, and if that person manages to breach that door, then that changes things, right? Or could change things. So keep all these things in mind and use good judgment. And shooting through doors, typically not good judgment. It would be different if this was some kind of justifiable use of force when that other party is in a vehicle and you can see where they are and you're shooting through a door or window of that vehicle. But even that, again, is not ideal and is generally not recommended, because you cannot guarantee where that bullet's going to go once it passes through glass, once it passes through steel, once it passes through wood or whatever, right? So just know that bullets can and sometimes do behave unpredictably. In fact, I would say most of the time perform probably unpredictably, at least in some degree, when we shoot through objects. So advise caution. An interesting story nonetheless, though. And to be clear, though, it was the woman that was arrested and charged with aggravated menacing and criminal damage to property. The man involved in this incident that that fired the shot does not appear to have been charged.
Yep.
Family grateful for off-duty Boston officer who stopped dog from mauling child. This, according to WCVB.com, Channel 5 ABC News affiliate in the Boston area. Matthew, what happened in this incident?
Yeah, so basically what happens is a little after noon, people hear a boy screaming, and this off-duty officer must live in the area. It's an apartment building. If you watch the video, the homes are pretty close, or the buildings are pretty close. And they come outside and see a dog mauling this boy, this 11-year-old boy, who received many injuries from this mauling and had to get, surgery, emergency surgery and things, and was at one point, I think, critical condition from this pit bull attacking the dog, attacking the boy. So in the article, it says the off-duty officer fired a shot, and it's unclear if either the dog or the boy was struck by the shot. But in any event, that must have been able to cause the dog to separate from attacking the boy further, and they were able to get him to the hospital. And but this is one of those things where we kind of don't think about stuff like this, but animals especially certain breeds of dogs and stuff like that. They're animals. And they have an instinctual thing that sometimes kicks in, and it's evident from the statements here and the injuries that this boy sustained that had somebody not intervened, this boy likely would have died. And so this is a justified save. That's not typical, but it's certainly a justified save.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Non-typical. And it does say in the article that it's unclear, at least at the time of the publishing of this article, that whether the dog was struck by the shot that was fired or the child. It doesn't say anything about the child being injured by, as a result of the officer's actions. It says that this 11-year-old boy was in surgery after he was mauled. Presumably his injuries were from the dog. But regardless, officer stepped in and because of whatever actions he did take, broke off this attack with this dog and very well likely saved this boy's life.
Mm-hmm.
So good for this off-duty officer. I recognize certainly that there's no obligation, right, upon this man to step in and save this boy, right? Just as there's no obligation on anybody to have to intervene in any kind of situation. And also the Supreme Court that ruled that even an on-duty officer is not legally obligated to save a person's life. But here's an officer who is off duty. But I'd like to think that anyone in a similar situation would step in to help out a poor child from a vicious attack, from regardless of who or what is doing the attacking.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting story there out of Boston. These are non-typical DGUs is the note that Matthew had typed alongside these stories. And that is definitely the case. Real quick, while I take a short break again, Matthew here, and I just decided I need some
caffeine or something, right?
Some liquid refreshment here from the Jackson Hole Soda Company. This is Cowboy Cream Soda. I had one a couple days ago. It was pretty tasty. Oh, yeah. Tasty. All right. And there's a funny thing, too, on the cap of this bottle, by the way. It says, best dang soda in the whole darn country.
Bold claim.
I don't know if it's the best, but it's pretty darn good. On to Philadelphia, where, according to NBCPhiladelphia.com, a store owner was shot 5 times while fighting a robber. This, according to police there. It says both the store owner and suspect were taken to Temple University Hospital, where they're both listed in stable condition. So it appears that both these individuals are going to survive this incident. But let me break down how this went down. In Philadelphia, the store owner, it was about 7 p.m. on a Monday evening when a 51-year-old man entered the corner store that this 36-year-old owner where he was working that evening. This 51-year-old man went into the store and announced a robbery, it says, and pointed a gun at the store owner's head. It says the store owner then grabbed the gun and tried to take it out of the suspect's hands. So pause there. First of all, let's recognize the fact that this gun is pointed at this man's head, right? This is gutsy. This is a gutsy move, because if anything so much goes wrong, which very likely well could in a situation like this, you might just take a round right to the head then and there, and it's done and over with, right? So you better, if that's a decision you make, you better absolutely know it's the right one, and you better know that you are committed to the cause, because if you are not committed, then, as is going to become apparent in our next story, the importance of commitment and also wise tactics, it can really get you in trouble here. And also, taking a gun out of someone's hands, especially when that person is ready to make use of that gun and is also not afraid of using that gun, there's a good chance you're going to get yourself hurt. So what happened here is the store owner attempted to disarm the suspect who had the gun pointed at his head. During the struggle, the store owner was shot 4 times in the stomach and once in the left arm. The suspect, meanwhile, was shot once in the right finger and may have also suffered a graze wound to the right side of his head. Store employees and a customer rushed in and helped hold the suspect until police arrived. A word of advice or caution to that. So, and it's great that people rushed in to help as soon as this incident happened to take control of the suspect. Again, know that you are putting yourself into that situation, and you may get yourself in trouble. But what I wanted to say is that you want to make sure you truly do gain control of that gun. If it has been removed from or kicked away from the hands of the suspect, hopefully it's someone who is knowledgeable about guns. You want to make sure you get a hold of that gun and get it properly secured, unloaded, and away from the suspect. So just make sure we got to keep things in perspective and remember the priority of things. Yes, we want to get control of the suspect, but honestly, more importantly is getting control of that weapon, because even if that suspect's able to get away, I'd rather that than a situation where they're able to retain control of that gun in any way or regain control of it and then continue to use it against you. Anyway, so quite a wild story here, but kudos to this store owner for what seems to me a pretty good commitment level. I mean, he went for it. He stayed in it. Yes, he got himself shot a bunch badly. Could have really ended badly for him. Meaning it could have ended his life. It seems that he is going to survive. And kudos to him for being willing to fight, because there's a lot of people that don't have that fight within them, as will be evidenced, unfortunately, by our next story.
Yeah. I mean, you hit it on the head, right? You have to have being able to pull a trigger, being able to, be tactically minded is useless if you give up. And, I think oftentimes we talk about, not drawing on a drawn gun. Obviously the store manager or clerk didn't have a gun, but sometimes compliance works and sometimes it doesn't. And you make that call where you see you're gauging this person who's holding the gun and saying, what are my odds if I comply? And if you do that risk reward and you start saying, based off of this guy's actions and what he's doing, I don't think that I'm going to survive even if I comply, then your next best option is to try to disarm him. And, and at that point, like you said, you have to be overwhelmingly violent to stop that, because that's it, right? Like they've already shown the intent. So it's a pretty crazy story, but I'm glad it seems like he's going to be okay. So
yeah. Hand-to-hand combatives is an important piece of the overall self-defense plan, if you will. Don't overlook that, right? Don't get so trapped into, well, I got a gun, I'm good to go, because there are situations where the ability to fight, just all out fight, to roll, to wrestle, to whatever's required in the considering the circumstances. Guys, get out there, and if you have the option of taking some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes or other forms of, where hand-to-hand combatives are taught, I highly recommend that you do so. I'm unfortunately right now not able to train in that area as much as I used to and as much as I'd like to. I hope to get back into that more, but at least I have some experience and some knowledge in not just the use of a gun, but also in hand-to-hand defensive techniques. So anyway, all right, let's get now to our next story. Matthew, you could take the lead on this one, according to foxnews.com. And this is, I imagine a lot of folks have heard about this one by now. It was an unfortunate story that I thought, honestly, Matthew, strangely, came almost on the anniversary, just a few days later, over a year after the shooting in Texas last year, where, of course, the now famous Jack Wilson, used his SIG 229 to stop that shooter there. We had another incident in Texas at a church, but unfortunately, this one resulted in the local pastor being killed and 2 others injured.
Yeah, so this happened, like you said, at a Starville Methodist Church. It happened 9:30 a.m. Sunday morning, and so one of the pastors walks into one of the bathrooms and finds somebody there that isn't supposed to be there. Apparently, there's some sort of it's unclear exactly what happened, whether he drew his firearm and tried to keep the guy, at bay, or if they started to get into a fight and then the gun came out. It's unclear exactly. But in any event, the pastor ends up, I'm sorry. The pastor pointed a gun initially at the suspect and told him to leave. At that point is when the subject disarms, and the fight ensues, disarms the pastor and takes his own gun and shoots him. And the pastor ends up dying. Now there are 2 other individuals in the church at this time, and they're both. One of them's injured with a gunshot wound. I believe one was injured with a gunshot wound, and the other one I'm not sure exactly. Or maybe they were both shot, and one was more injured than the other, because one's in the hospital and one apparently is not. Then this guy gets takes the pastor's car, drives off, and then later is stopped by police, and he's found with a gunshot wound in his hand. So, and they're not sure if it was self-inflicted or if it happened during the fight. I would imagine, I'm just speculating that it happened during the fight, but who knows? So it's crazy because, I imagine there's some people out there that are on church security teams or whatnot. I am, and I know before Sunday mornings, we walk the building and we go through all the rooms and make sure before people start getting there that nobody got in there overnight and there's not something dangerous in there for those people. And it's one of those things where, just having the gun doesn't mean you're in charge of this situation, or you're in control and that you're going to survive. And I think, in retrospect, the pastor probably would have done things differently, see the guy, hey, I'm not going to pull my gun out right away. And, maybe handle it, maybe back out. But it's just one of those things where we don't think anything bad is going to happen because we have a firearm. But like you said in the previous story, the roles were reversed, right? The bad guy had the gun, the good guy disarmed him, so to speak. This time it's reversed, so it can happen both ways. So it's just the importance of not just having a gun, right? That's not the goal. The goal is to be able to use the gun appropriately and know when to use it and know how to approach situations like this. So unfortunately, this is one of those tragic things that I hate to see, but hopefully we can learn something from it.
Yep. And I alluded to this story several times in that last story we just covered, because what we have here is the pastor who pointed a gun at the suspect, asked him to leave. And all I can say is that based on the fact that it says then that the suspect was able to disarm him before then shooting and killing him, tells me that that there was not space between the pastor and the suspect. And that's really key here. Okay. If you're close enough to get disarmed, then you are way too close. And how do you know if you're too close? Within arm's reach, certainly. 6, even 9 feet. Like I would want to be back off, but as much as I can. That's the answer. You want to be away as much as you can. If you had to be at arm's length for whatever reason, then you want to be keeping that gun in a retention position, meaning close into your body, putting as much space between you and them. right? You can even you can even be in a retention position and have that gun anchored across your chest while you're extending your other arm out to create space. Okay. And by so doing, you're not just like if my arms are 3 feet long, I'm actually extending that distance as I turn my body away from them with my gun anchored in close. But that's not ideal, right? I would seriously. So it sounds like that the confrontation occurred or started in a restroom within the church.
Mm-hmm.
So other news sources I saw, and that might very well be a relatively confined space. And so I would say that you really you want to get out of there. That is not the place to be making your stand. That is not the place to be confronting this man with gun or without gun, right? Chances are, if it's a restroom, there's one entrance and one exit. So you know what? Get out of there and back away. Have your gun at the ready if need be, but don't be making your last stand right there in the restroom. That's a terrible place to find yourself in a fight with or without gun. All right, so just some things to think about and consider here. I don't mean to judge this pastor too critically. That's not really what this is meant to be. This is a learning moment, is what it is, and we don't know all the facts either. So all it is interpolations based on what has been reported. But these are still all valid things to talk about, regardless of what the actual facts are. We use these a lot, and this happens all the time with these stories that we cover in our Justified Saves episodes, is you use the stories as a basis to then go, okay, what other things or what things do we want to know or consider or be thinking about that can be expanded to a broader range of circumstances and situations, because that's what this is about. Because you're not going to find yourself in the exact same situation this pastor was in, and that's really the point I want to make here, is that regardless of exactly what happened, doesn't necessarily matter if what we can learn from it applies to a broader array of circumstances, because your circumstances will not be identical to what this pastor was faced with. Right.
Exactly.
So the important lessons to take away from this is create space, create distance from a threat. Okay. Space and distance is your friend, regardless of if they have a knife, a gun, a bat, whatever it is, because space and distance either means they can't hurt you with the weapon that they have, or means it's hard for them to hit you with their gun. Right. And I would also hopefully be able to bet on the fact that if I create distance off of a suspect, off of someone that I consider to be a threat to me, and they've got a gun and I've got a gun, I'd like to think that my ability to shoot at distance is better than theirs. Right? So space and distance is always your first priority when dealing with a threat, if you have that option, right? And then don't fight in confined spaces. Call authorities and get them there to help if you can, right? So many things here, and it goes back to principles that we talk about all the time on the podcast, Matthew, where avoidance and de-escalation. In other words, not having to go there in the first place, meaning not having to actually pull that gun, not actually having to press that trigger. I want to avoid all of that if I can, because it makes the aftermath so much easier in every respect, right? Deadly force is my last resort, whether by law or by my own values and morals, or just by simple tactics and the rules of a fight that allows me the best chance of surviving that day and getting home to my family.
Yeah, I agree. Yep, I agree, man. Completely.
Yeah, Tim's got a great comment here on Facebook. He says that he's thought about some of the same things here regarding this incident. He says that the pastor may have saw the man who had the church's deposit bag in the bathroom, which might have changed to the pastor trying to stop the man from stealing the church's funds versus backing away. And see, this is a great example if that's true. And I think that's a likely scenario, that you have this man cornered in the bathroom and you want to try to keep him from getting away because he's got, $1,000, $2,000 or whatever of church funds, which this is very well be small, relatively small church. And that might be a lot of money for that church. And so, but the fact is, money is just money, right? And now we have a dead pastor, and there's no amount of money that will bring him back.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mix up of priorities. If that's what was the thinking in this pastor's mind.
Yeah.
Now, nobody goes into something thinking, well, this is going to get me killed, right? But it's about recognizing beforehand that, confronting this man in a confined space with my gun outstretched might not be the best idea.
Yes, sir.
Next up, 80-year-old Pensacola homeowner shoots 15-year-old suspected car thief. This one out of Pensacola, Florida, obviously on WEARTV.com, ABC affiliate down there. And basically what happened is an 80-year-old man said walked outside to lock his cars. Two men happened to be pointing a gun at him at that point. They basically, he goes out to lock his cars, apparently. I don't know. I guess maybe he forgot to lock his cars. I typically lock my car as soon as I park it, and leave. But he goes outside to lock his cars, it said. And two men approached him pointing a gun, demanding his car. The police said that the homeowner then grabbed his concealed gun and opened fire. One of the suspects was a 15-year-old who was shot near his heart. He's listed in critical condition. The second suspect, likely another young individual, got away. So that's the story. Not a lot to work with there, but the fact that these men approached him with a gun pointing at him, he could comply, but it sort of leaves him no choice as far as this is an open and shut. And it even says in the bottom of the article, stand your ground case in Florida here because these are armed criminals, and he chose to engage them, and he won, which is good for him. 80-year-old man against a couple of young punks, and he managed to be the victor that day. So good for him.
Yeah, I mean, tactically, you covered everything in mindset and all that. I guess my beef with this story is, first of all, the title is misleading. They weren't a suspected car thief. They pointed a gun at this guy. You could just as easily say it's an attempted murder. I mean, they pointed a gun at an 80-year-old dude. That's not, maybe the end goal for them was to steal a car, but anybody who had a gun pointed at them would not say, oh, well, I was, somebody was trying to steal my car. They'd say, somebody was trying to kill me. They pointed a gun at me. And so, I think that's, we have to, be aware of those types of things. And additionally, I don't know, it says it's a stand your ground case. I don't really think that fleeing would be particularly, or it would even be considered considering that somebody's pointing a gun at them. That's an immediate threat. They're in within arm's length distance. It's immediate. It's imminent. They can carry it out. So I don't think, even if there wasn't stand your ground, even if it was a duty to retreat state, I don't even think that there'd be an issue there either. So, it's one of those things. One thing that I did notice over these last month or so of going through these cases, and even last month, that the number of juveniles committing violent crime is astronomically higher than it was before. I just anecdotally saw some news reports in the Columbus area and several carjackings and things perpetrated by juveniles, like 15, 16, 17-year-old kids going out carjacking people, robbing people at gunpoint and stuff like that. So, just as an aside, don't fall into a trap of thinking like, oh, okay, well, these are just 15-year-old kids. They're not harmful because, they're just as deadly as anybody else. Just kind of, not tactically stuff, comments or anything, but just about how things are kind of reported on. I just lost sound.
I just realized I was muted. I apologize.
I was trying to figure out. I thought I just lost some sound.
Well, there was some background noise here on my end. So anyway, I was just saying, yeah, man, I spot on with all that. And you're exactly right. I mean, I even kind of said something to this fact, but I retract what I said about this being a stand your ground case, because there's no duty to retreat in this case. There is none, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what state you're in. And that's the point you made, and you're spot on about that. So, and I mentioned the stand your ground because the article pointed that out, like really goes out of their way to say that, which I find interesting. And the media does not help in effectively and accurately communicating to the general public what stand your ground is really all about.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, all right, final story. And we're kind of running a little bit over time, so I'm going to run through this one fairly quickly. But this one out of Port Arthur, Texas, this according to FoxSanAntonio.com, and the Port Arthur Police Department says homeowner shoots, kills home invasion robbery suspect to protect young children. And this is another interesting article. And by the way, it's valid in that, hey, protecting your children is a valid reason to use force in defense of somebody. I mean, that's what I would do for my own kids. But again, it seems to be another example of something where the media, like, it's almost like they grab onto something and like, like, ooh, this is good. Says again and again and again how he did this to protect his young children. But the fact is, regardless of young children in the home or not, it was probably every bit just as justified, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But here's the situation. You had a homeowner, a man, who's at home. His kids are there. It actually says that it says a female, whether it's his wife or girlfriend or whatever, right? But a female resident was arriving at home, it says. And about the time she's arriving at home, these three armed assailants, I might add, three of them forcibly then enter the home. Now, that's a common thing, right? We've seen that in many other circumstances where the prime opportunity for a criminal is, when you're arriving at home to try to rob you then and there, or gain access to your house then and there. So we should always be like, one thing I do, right? I don't have a garage I can pull my vehicle, my large, F350 truck into, so it's parked outside. Before I exit my vehicle, I'm checking my mirrors left and right and behind and all that, and basically just doing a look around the vehicle before I hit that unlock button, grab the handle, and exit my vehicle. And that's just something that's developed by, habit. That's what I do every time. Check the surroundings before I get out. This is my safe place, right? I'm in my vehicle. I'm reasonably well protected. So I want to check and make sure that there's not somebody sneaking up on me as I'm about to get out and go walk up to my house. So, but that's what went down here. This woman's going into her home. Three armed assailants then force their way into the home. The father of these children, and presumably partner, spouse to this woman, hears commotion, grabs his rifle, doesn't specify what type of rifle, not that it matters, but I kind of would like to know if it was an AR, because it's a good home defense weapon. Grabs his rifle, shoots at these three armed intruders at that, that they've now intruded into the home, shoots at them, kills one of them. The other two presumably escape. And that's the end of the story. Like, bravo to this father who had a couple of young children at home with him. This woman that he presumably also cares about, and he did what he had to do to defend his home and his family that night. Good for him.
Yeah, I mean, I can't add anything else. Just wanted to end, the series of stories with something positive and a good, solid defensive gun use. So, like you said, kudos.
Yep. Yeah, man. And kudos to you for compiling a great list of justified save stories for this episode today, Matthew. I don't know if folks realize, but Matthew primarily takes the brunt of the work to put together these collection of stories each time. So thank you, good sir. Well,
Thank you.
We are now at that point where we start wrapping up the episode. Today's episode was sponsored again by the new Ready Up Gear Range Ruck backpack. Again, you can find it at concealedcarry.com/Range Ruck, and also the Legal Boundaries by State book, available at concealedcarry.com/gun law book. And in fact, we're giving away a free copy of the Legal Boundaries by State book today as part of our weekly giveaway. And so Matthew has picked our random winner from the entries that we received this last week from those of you that have gone to concealedcarry.com/podcast prize and signed up. And again, you'll want to do that each week. And in fact, this coming week's prize will be a free copy of the Door Ambush DVD, which is very appropriate considering the story we just ended on there. So if you want to get some tips and some ideas about how to better defend yourself against a potential door ambush, then you might want a copy of this training video. All right, so the Door Ambush DVD will be next week's prize, and you can sign up for that opportunity to be a lucky random winner at concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. Who's our lucky winner this week, Matthew?
Lucky winner is Shane. Shane, your last name starts with a W. I'm in the process of emailing you. So
Nice.
Congratulations.
Congrats to Shane W. on this week's winner. Again, he's going to get a copy of the Legal Boundaries by State book. Guys, we thank you so much. Here we are in 2021. What an interesting start to the year already. Who knows where we're going to find ourselves, both as a podcast, as a business, as a country in the next year. I'd like to think that things for us will be bigger and better than ever. But I certainly am praying for the state of and the welfare and well-being of our nation. And I hope that you are too, at least in whatever capacity you might, do that. So guys, thanks so much. We appreciate you for supporting us in the podcast, and we're going to let you go with a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.